turning setbacks into stepping stones, finding strength in God when times are tough. Have you ever felt like you're walking through a season where every step feels heavy and every obstacle feels impossible to overcome? Life sometimes throws curveballs at us, and it feels like no matter what we do, we're stuck in a cycle of struggle and setback. But let me tell you something, friend. Every setback, every struggle can be a stepping stone for something greater, something that God has already set in motion. When we face difficulty, we're often tempted to focus on the negative, the pain, the disappointment, the frustration. But what if I told you that God uses our toughest seasons as part of His perfect plan to shape us into who we were always meant to be? What if these setbacks aren't a sign of defeat, but rather divine setups for our next level of growth? In this message, we'll explore how faith can transform our challenges into growth opportunities. We'll uncover how God, in His loving and infinite wisdom, is always working behind the scenes, turning our pain into purpose. So buckle up, because today we're going to turn those setbacks into stepping stones, embracing the power of resilience. Before we dive deeper into this, let's get one thing clear. Resilience is key. Resilience isn't just about bouncing back from hardship. It's about using what you've gone through to push forward with even greater strength. Life will throw challenges your way, but resilience is what allows you to get up every time with a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. You see, the Bible is filled with stories of people who faced overwhelming odds, yet found strength in God to rise above their circumstances. One of the most powerful examples of resilience comes from the Apostle Paul. In 2 Corinthians 4 verses 8 to 9, Paul talks about the incredible hardships he faced, including being crushed, perplexed, and persecuted. But despite all of this, he says, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." What Paul is showing us here is that no matter how tough life gets, there is always strength in God. Even when things seem hopeless, God can give us the resilience to rise again. Setbacks don't define us, but our response to those setbacks does. And the best part is, God is always with us, giving us the strength to move forward. The great reframe, seeing challenges as opportunities. What if we reframe how we look at challenges? What if, instead of viewing setbacks as roadblocks, we saw them as opportunities? That's exactly what God wants to teach us. Every difficulty, every trial, is a divine opportunity for growth. In Romans 5 verses 3 to 4, Paul tells us that we glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. What does that mean for us? It means that when we face challenges, God isn't punishing us. Instead, He's using those challenges to build something greater in us. God is allowing us to go through the fire to refine our character, to strengthen our resolve, and to build our hope. And the key to turning setbacks into stepping stones is in how we choose to respond. We can either let challenges break us down, or we can let them build us up. The choice is ours. If we rely on God's strength, if we trust in His timing, we can turn every setback into a stepping stone that moves us closer to our purpose. Joseph, a story of setbacks and stepping stones. Let's turn to one of the most inspiring stories in the Bible. Joseph, young man who endured a series of setbacks that seemed impossible to overcome. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. If anyone had a right to feel defeated, it was Joseph. Yet, instead of letting these setbacks define him, he turned them into stepping stones that led him to greatness. Joseph's story is a perfect example of how God uses setbacks for his greater plan. In Genesis 50 verse 20, after everything Joseph went through, he said to his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Think about that. Joseph recognized that his setbacks weren't just random. They weren't a sign that he was abandoned or forgotten. No, they were part of a bigger plan that God was orchestrating all along. What looked like a series of failures was, in fact, a series of stepping stones leading Joseph to the fulfillment of his divine purpose. Joseph's setbacks brought him to a place where he could save not only his family, but an entire nation. His story reminds us that God's plan is always bigger than we can see in the moment. When you're in the midst of a setback, it's easy to lose sight of God's greater purpose. But just like Joseph, your setbacks can lead to stepping stones for something far greater than you ever imagined. Trusting in God's timing. One of the hardest parts of dealing with setbacks is trusting in God's timing. We live in a world that values instant gratification. We want results now, and we want answers now. But God's timing is perfect, and sometimes his greatest work happens in the waiting. Think of David, who was anointed to be king as a young shepherd boy, but spent years running from Saul before finally stepping into his destiny. During that waiting period, David had to learn patience, humility, and reliance on God. If he had rushed ahead and taken matters into his own hands, he would have missed out on the lessons God wanted him to learn. In Psalm 27 verse 14, David says, "Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." Waiting can be hard, but it's in the waiting that God strengthens our faith and prepares us for what's ahead. When setbacks hit, we may feel like we're being held back. But God isn't holding us back. He's preparing us for something greater. He's using this season to shape us, mold us, and make us stronger. So, trust his timing. Trust that he's working behind the scenes, even when you can't see the whole picture. Practical steps to turn setbacks into stepping stones. Now, let's talk about how we can actively turn our setbacks into stepping stones. Here are some practical steps you can take to build resilience and trust in God during tough times. Shift your focus. It's easy to focus on what's going wrong, but God calls us to focus on what he's doing in the midst of the struggle. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" Shift your focus from the problem to the potential that God is working in your life. Lean into God's strength. In times of weakness, God's strength is made perfect. Lean into his presence through prayer, worship, and the Word. When you don't have the strength to go on, trust that he will carry you. Isaiah 40 verse 29 says, "He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak." Keep moving forward. Setbacks can make us feel like giving up, but God is always calling us forward. When we keep taking small steps forward, even when we don't feel like it, we're showing faith. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 reminds us to trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. Even when things seem tough, keep moving forward. Embrace the process. Growth takes time. The setbacks we experience aren't always quick fixes. They are part of a process. Embrace the process of growth and allow God to shape you through each experience. When you look at the long-term picture, you'll realize that setbacks were not meant to break you, but to make you. Believe in God's promises. When setbacks hit, it's easy to doubt God's promises. But God is faithful, and He will never leave you or forsake you. Hold on to His promises like Jeremiah 29 verse 11, where He says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." Turning setbacks into stepping stones. As we wrap up, let me remind you that no setback is ever wasted. Every challenge you face is an opportunity for God to work in your life. Your setbacks are not the end. They're the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where God will use those challenges to refine your character, strengthen your faith, and prepare you for something greater. Just like Joseph, just like David, and just like the Apostle Paul, you too can turn your setbacks into stepping stones. God is with you every step of the way, and He is always using your challenges to fulfill His purpose in your life. So, when times get tough, remember that God is working behind the scenes, and He's turning every setback into a stepping stone that will lead you to your destiny. Stay strong, keep trusting, and know that with God on your side, you're always moving forward, even when it doesn't feel like it. Your setback is simply the setup for your comeback.